That music was brought to you and played by Steve Miller, my brother-in-law, and produced by Lainey Miller, my niece. Our Outside Insights guest, Nick Wilkinson, has led a diverse career across technology, business, and creative pursuits. Nick boasts over 30 years of experience in the tech sector. He has served in executive roles at major corporations like Computer Sciences Corporation, as well as led many private equity-backed software companies as CEO and president. He's got a very diverse background, spans time in the British Royal Air Force. He's worked across multiple continents, multiple industries. And I think I'm excited to talk about leadership and transformation, perhaps some tech. In recent years, Nick has delved into creative projects, including writing novels and producing films. And he joins us today to discuss what I think is a remarkable journey. And I just want to welcome you to the show, Nick. We had a lot of fun getting ready to maybe prep for this, but I'm excited to have you as a guest today.
All right. Thank you, Chris. And thanks for all those kind words. When you kind of write it down in retrospect, it does sound like you've done a lot. I've done a lot of things, but you're only ever doing one of them at once, so you don't tend to necessarily notice. So.
And it's funny. When I looked at it, you look at things, I mean, it certainly is diverse. It certainly is global. You certainly have done different things. So it's hard not to brag on those things a little bit. So about 4 years ago, I started this podcast, Outside Insights, because I was hearing from customers. I've had a blog for about 10 years where folks were really interested in closing their personal and professional gaps. I'm in staffing. I'm an entrepreneurial coach, advisor, as you are. So the topic was always about, I don't have the life I want. I'm not going to where I want to go. So during the pandemic, which a lot of folks, I think, had a spark of creativity, I just started to invite successful people, however you define success, and talking about, their lessons learned, the mistakes they've made, their journeys has proven to make us mere mortals, and folks are enjoying that storytelling, and it gives an opportunity for them to apply our lessons to their life. So that's a bit of the gist. To get us started, you've worn all these hats over the years: CEO, president, VP in big businesses, now advisor, entrepreneur, author, and of course, more in the creative. What excites you about what you're working on today? And, it's a balancing act of business and creative, but what's your muse today?
I think that the most exciting thing about my time at the moment is everything I'm doing is quite new, and I've always tried to pursue things that stretch me and pursue the lifelong learning objective. And in both of my main activities, the creative side on the script writing and the directing, and on the business advisory side, I'm faced with new things and new experiences and meet new people on a day-to-day basis. So that keeps me going. I've never really been one to sit still and kind of soak up the sunshine. Even when I'm on holiday, I don't do that. So the fun part at the moment is the new experiences. That on the film side of things, it has been a journey, and you kiss a lot of frogs before you find the prince and all that. And as I've said to people, I'm enjoying every minute of it, even when I'm not enjoying every minute of it, because It's all new experiences. Similarly, on the advisory side, working with different customers in different circumstances, different stages in their company's development, different backgrounds that they bring into it. Oftentimes, I work with young entrepreneurs in the early stages of their companies, and you learn about a new tool or you learn about a new approach that you've not come across. So I say I learn as much from those experiences as they learn from me. So I think a common factor of things that I enjoy are new experiences and getting involved in new projects.
So, folks, I should share that Nick is across the pond. There's a few hours between us, so I don't think that glitch is as evident. But if it is, those are the gremlins of the internet, Nick. And I find that they make it charming, but we'll be able to clean that up and adjust those things. So
okay, good.
It's all good. So in hearing you kind of describe that, I was curious who the frogs and who the princes are, but we can get into that to find out exactly who that is. But
Yeah.
you've also been writing, and I was in my own head. I thought you were writing because it was a release from corporate America, but that writing has evolved. Care to talk about that a touch?
Yeah, so certainly that was the genesis of it. I think when you and I first discussed it, I'd written throughout my career in the big corporate world. Whenever I'd come across something that I found particularly amusing or disappointing, or some show of hubris, or things that I just thought were just touched me in some way, I would kind of make a little note of them and almost entertain myself and relieve stress by having a quiet giggle about it all, private laughter. But at some point, I started assembling that into a story, encouraged by others to kind of take it one step further. And then with further encouragement, that became, I took a step from it becoming a novel to it becoming the basis for some kind of television or film. I wasn't quite sure which it would be. I'm still not quite sure which that one would be, to be honest. It potentially lends itself in both directions to a mini TV series or a film. That then, as I was trying to work that and get that into shape where it was financially viable to be done into some kind of series, the pandemic struck, and it looked like this whole thing was just going to be a kind of, not a waste of time would be a wrong word, but kind of something that didn't come to an outcome. It didn't actually generate anything. And I was then encouraged by a local filmmaker who I've been friends with in the Delaware area. Her kids were at school with mine. She's a film producer. She encouraged me to write something different, and that led me to writing one main script, which is a completely different genre. It's a sports-related comedy, and then I've written several other things. And I really enjoyed the script writing process. It's different to writing a novel. The things you have to think about. It's more like, whereas a novel is kind of a long. Obviously, you have to think about every aspect of it. And you have to paint every picture for the reader. Writing a script, you can't overplay that because the viewer sees a lot immediately. So you have to focus on different things in producing a script. I actually find it more rewarding. It's you have to be more cryptic with it in some senses. You have to suggest things as opposed to spell them out, and that kind of appeals to my problem-solving nature. As you know, I think one of my biggest passions every day or biggest pastimes is doing a cryptic crossword. So I found the script writing had kind of a sense to that as well. Certainly for the sort of stuff I want to write. And it's like a 3-dimensional thing with, well, even 4 dimensions with the time span. So I've really enjoyed the script writing stuff. There are some things about it. It's very nuanced. There's a lot of rules about how you write stuff and the formatting and all that kind of stuff, which takes you a while to learn. Like any kind of new thing you're trying, it takes you a while to get to any level of accomplishment at it. And I look at things that I wrote when I first started doing it and look at now and kind of turn my nose up and say, oh, why would you write it like that?
But that's an evolution. That's the development, right?
Exactly. You kind of learn by doing, and you get feedback from people. And what I meant by, kiss a lot of frogs before you find the prince, you get a lot of rejection. You have to, if you want to do anything in the creative industry, it's perhaps true in all industries, but certainly very much the case in the creative side. And you hear it from lots of people, actors and musicians and performers of all kinds. You have to be comfortable with rejection. And I've certainly become that over the past several years.
You have to have passion for your ideas, So Nick, I had the pleasure of watching your short film, the Fast Track program. And, obviously it's a film you want people to see and to watch and enjoy. And we can talk about how they can do that. I have to tell you what I was struck by is obviously it's so obvious to you, but in watching it, I literally saw that process of you applying your years of leadership to the script. And I was wondering, if it was almost I know it was cathartic, but it's a form of leadership development in watching that short film. So I enjoyed it immensely. And I felt like the 12 minutes was an hour. It was that, that intense to me, and I enjoyed it immensely.
Oh, thank you. Good. Yeah. So I appreciate that. Obviously, yes, a lot of experience did go into that. It was my own experience of a career and the politics and the people and whatever condensed into a 12-minute film, but every second of that film had some meaning to it. Even the music in the background when they're in a bar was chosen specifically to make a point. The way there's a scene where somebody's fishing, the way they were doing the fish, all that were all kind of based on some kind of memory or some kind of message. And so, yeah, it was fun. It was definitely packed from an emotional point of view. It was also fun in a couple of cases. I used as background actors people who'd actually been in those jobs in the companies that I'd worked for, and one person who came up and played a particular role, she said, when I described what I wanted from it, I know exactly who this is. I know what to do. So yeah, there was a lot of parallels with my own life and history in it. But at the same time, it was also a fantastic learning experience to go from actually writing something to masterminding the direction of it, the planning of it, and picking out locations for it and how I wanted the costumes to be and whatever, and then going ahead and actually shooting it. It was the first time I directed a film shoot, obviously. There was, it wasn't a huge crew of, like you hear of hundreds on some of these mega movies, but it was, 30 people or so. And they kind of anticipated that I might be a little bit either nervous or not necessarily know what I was doing or whatever. But it didn't pan out like that. And it felt very similar to taking a leadership position in a software company, for example. A bunch of very creative people, all with ideas that you need to find a way to listen to and show that you've listened to. But at the end of the day, or the end of the conversation, they turn to you for the decision. So you've heard all that. What are we going to do, Nick? Oh, okay. Well, I think we'll do this. And then being calm and decisive and encouraging everybody to give it their best, and that's what we did. And I'm very proud of the outcome for my first go around. I don't think it's a bad little film at all. So yeah, good stuff.
Nick, how can people find that film?
So at the moment, to be quite honest, they can't. We have there's various ways in which film gets to the public.
Yes.
One of which is through what they call the festival circuit. So there are countless numbers of film festivals that kind of follow an annual pattern. Some of the bigger ones, some of the listeners will have heard of. But then there are smaller ones, like there's one in your neck of the woods in Rehoboth Beach in September. There's one in Philadelphia. There are numerous in New York. There's some in Washington D.C. That all over the country. And the big ones that you like, Sundance, people may have heard of.
Absolutely.
They are much. All of them are quite difficult to get into because the organizers are the programs are oversubscribed with people wanting their films to be seen. We've submitted the fast track program to, I think, around a dozen festivals so far. None of them have got to the decision point yet. But while we're doing that, we aren't. The rules of those things don't allow you to publicly put forward the film. You have to wait until it's been through the festivals, and then maybe if you're very lucky, certainly very lucky for a short film like this, somebody buys it and they screen it for you, either in a movie theater or a streamer, or more likely you put it on a site like YouTube or Vimeo or whatever. But for the moment, we can't do that until it's been through if you do public a display of it like that, then you can't put it in the festival process. So we will wait and go through that. Hopefully, into some of the festivals and get some awards or at least some recognition. And then once that season is complete, then we'll make appropriate arrangements for it to be seen as best we can.
What's the timing on that? This is August of 2023. What's that process look like?
So we put it into festivals through to the remaining part of this year. Then we'll see how we do in terms of whether we get in them or not, if we start getting some awards. But I would think by within 6 months or so early next year, maybe February of next year, we should be able to just pull off the blinkers for it and pass it on. In the meantime, we have had several private screenings. We had one at my home for all the people who've been involved in making the film. Then we had one with another friend of mine who lives up in New York in his home, and we're planning to have another one at my home in sometime in September or October. So we're doing getting the message out there, but in a way that it keeps us in line with the rules of the festivals, and hopefully that will pay dividends, and we'll get some some recognition from one or two of the festivals, which would be a fabulous way to kind of mark the project.
Well, I wish you the best in that, and perhaps we'll have you back on, and we can even show it live here.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah, we'll have to arrange that. Once we can take the blinkers off, we'll give everybody the access to it somehow through the podcast portal or something, Chris.
That sounds terrific. So just kind of mixing things up. Nick, I was thinking about your career, and there's the term career ladder, and then there's this modern career lattice, and I felt like you've climbed the ladder and lattice, especially in hearing you enthusiastically talk about learning new things or applying the leadership model you've kind of used in tech and bringing it to creative. It makes total sense. You started in the military. Did those experiences shape the leader you are today? And what influences did that have on you?
Yeah, undoubtedly. Joining in my case, the British Royal Air Force was, I think, an essential part of what I've been able to do in my life and the person I am. Again, at the time when as I kind of said earlier, at the time when you're doing it, you aren't necessarily thinking like that. Getting up and polishing your boots every morning on basic training, you probably think was an absolute pain, but. I've never left the house with an untidy pair of shoes ever since, kind of thing. You just absorb it. Probably the biggest thing that I learned in the military, and it's actually something that people probably don't think about too much, or don't appreciate if they've not been in the military, is to be successful as a leader in the military. I was an officer in the military in the Air Force. You actually have to do what now I think they refer to as servant leadership or humble leadership or whatever. Because if you come in and start trying to boss people around and abuse your position and assume that because you've got the stripes, you're in authority, there are a million ways in which the people who you're trying to boss around can make you look completely foolish. And I first, straight out of training in my professional discipline in the Air Force, I was responsible for a group of maybe 70 folks. Roughly 70 people were under my command, as it were, and every one of them was older than me. Many of them had been in the Air Force longer than I'd been alive, and of course, I soon appreciated that if I started being the Mr. High and Mighty and bossing them around, I would be sent to there are the kind of apocryphal stories about the bossy young officer being sent to the stores to fetch a long stand or a long wait, and literally standing hours waiting for the long wait. Oh yeah, you've had that now. So there's so many ways in which the old hands, the people with the nous could really make you suffer if you tried to be overly bossy or authoritarian. But similarly, on the other hand, what I learned was those people wanted your help to make their themselves successful, wanted to get promoted, wanted to get their squadron to win awards, wanted to be the best unit on the base, wanted to win, to be proud of what they'd achieved. And if you could help them do that in some way, then they quickly adopted you and supported you and wanted you to be successful. So that very first group, when it came to every year that the group had something called the Air Officer Commanding Inspection, which was like a quality test, you'd call it, in civilian life for that particular unit. And we got an outstanding and an Air Officer Commander's commendation for our unit. And everyone there kind of was basking in the pride of that. And I was obviously very proud to have led that team, and they then became very supportive and proud of me because we'd achieved something together. So that lesson, I think, and when I left, and one of the things that happens in the military is you get moved around very often. And when I left that group, they gave me a plaque to reference this success. I've still got it, and that sense of achieving something with a group, being responsible for other people's success and their pride was a big learning for me, and one that I've always tried to put into practice subsequently.
My early leadership experiences, I did not learn those lessons, Nick. It seems so counterintuitive to me in the military environment, because I think command and control, I think leader, title, earned privilege. Were you unusual, or was that the leadership philosophy that was taught?
That was the leadership philosophy that was taught. Also, I was in a job in the military that relied upon me being nominally the leader of a large team. I wasn't a pilot, I was a ground officer responsible for what now is given the sexy title of logistics. Back in my day, it was the rather mundane supply and movements. But we bought stuff, we stored stuff, we put stuff in airplanes, we threw stuff out of the back of airplanes. It was that role. And there were a lot of people working in the ground branches of the Air Force. Only 0.1 of 1% of pilots. I think if you're in a real cutting edge warfighting role, i.e., you're a pilot, or if you're in the Royal Marine, in the Marines or something like that, then perhaps the command and control instinct is greater. Or certainly when you're actually you're really in the teeth of a conflict or something like that. But generally speaking, the military teaches good habits around the intersection of the team, the task, and the individual. And at times, those are, I remember, a key part of my training, this Venn diagram of the team, the task, and the individual, and how at times, depending on the circumstances and the priorities of the moment, the emphasis could change from the team needing a morale boost. Let's take a break and have you're on a forced march training thing. Let's take a break and have some hot chocolate or something.
Right.
The task, if we've got 30 seconds to get to the top of that hill and we take the flag, kind of thing. Or then the individual, Jimmy Schmitz has tripped over and hurt his ankle, and we got to take time out to help him. So that those three circles of influence and how you had to pay them different attention at different points in a particular exercise was another thing that I remembered. And again, something was ingrained into me, and I've been able to refer to in subsequent phases of my life.
So in keeping with the leadership theme, you've advised leaders, you've run companies, you're a mentor to young people starting business ideas. Continuing with this theme of leadership and lessons, what themes do you usually find that you focus on based on your experiences when you're in those roles, mentoring and advising others? What are the lessons that are common?
So one of the things that I find, certainly for younger entrepreneurs, Well, I was going to say that, but I'm going to backtrack and say I find it quite frequent, even in mature companies, is there really the need to actually take a beat and decide, really understand what is it you're trying to do, what is the goal, what is your mission, what is your end game. You know, if you had a magic wand, what would you what would you say that you were trying to, you would be the outcome. And I think a lot of times organizations, people, leaders get lost in the process and get fixated on the hurly burly and just consumed by tactical decision making, that they don't really know what they're trying to do. And I think, you know, the social media to some extent, certainly electronic media, the ubiquity of iPhones and whatever, I see people taking, they're just consumed with very minutia and don't really prioritize things properly. And I think that's really endemic in certainly in the business cultures that I've been involved in. And getting people to take a beat. You know, I was taught, again, at one point, I think it was in my big publicly traded career, that there's the difference between working in the business and working on the business. And if you only ever work in the business, then things never really improve. But leaders have to find some time, or everybody really has to be given some time to, even if it's only a small sliver, to work on the business. And actually, that if you take that time and go and really focus on what is my goal here, then you can have a strategy, then you can implement tactics to implement that strategy, and you start to see progress. But what I often encounter when first getting involved in an organization is not that, just a lot of kind of hamster wheelie type stuff,
Yeah.
and 1,000 decisions a day, none of them particularly profound, and all that energy just kind of disappearing into the air and no progress.
Nick, I've heard it described as a management team getting in the car and making left turns and going around the block over and over again.
Yeah.
You know, no destination in mind.
Yeah, whilst clicking through their LinkedIn feed, whilst changing the radio channel 15 times, whilst having a conversation with somebody on the phone. You know, it's all that and more is what I see.
Action is not results, or busy
No.
is not outcomes. I'd be curious whether you call it a North Star, or I think Collins called it a BHAG.
Yep.
I think you're not talking that long range target. I feel like you're talking about more operational 1 to 3 year thinking. But how would you riff on that? Is it a combination of both?
Well, that really depends to what, you know, why I'm getting involved with an organization and what they've asked me to do and the status. Typically, if I'm getting involved with a very early stage company and giving advice to an entrepreneur, then yeah, that tends to be in the medium term. So yeah, 1 to 2 years, if that. But it's still a more long-term horizon than they're typically making decisions about now. If I get involved with more of a mature company, kind of like a mid-market, and they're looking maybe for an exit or some kind of significant investment or whatever, then that can have a 2+ year horizon, and the objectives that they're trying to fill can be more substantial. But again, the horizon is longer than typically that they've been taking decisions on. So I guess I try and give some kind of slow things down, look a little further away, plan things out, and then your action can be, if you know where you're going, then you can make mid-course corrections. It's like if you're sailing a boat kind of thing. If you don't know where you're headed, then every time it's windy, you kind of, or the wind changes, whatever, you kind of just, you're going off course all the time. Whereas if you know, well, I'm going for that landmark over there, and maybe I might have to tack a bit here because this quarter's sales are a bit lean, or so-and-so's quit, but if I can tack back next quarter, hire somebody new, and I'll be back on course again. If you don't know where you're going, then everything's a crisis. So.
I'd be curious. I don't know if these will resonate for you, but I think about lean startup methodology, the book
Yeah.
and its influence on that. I also think, I'm sure you bumped into some companies that use a business planning process like an EOS traction or scaling up, I often think that those methodologies cause quarterly 90-day sprints, and maybe get you driving around making left turns over and over again too. It's a natural sprint to get something done. It doesn't really, you never lift your head.
Yeah, I think like any kind of methodology or heuristic tool of any kind, it all needs to be thought through and applied with a modicum of common sense, or even a pinch of salt, whatever you want to say. There is some kind of structured approach, like the Jim Collins thing with the BHAGs and whatever. It was Good to Great, I think that book was. I remember, that was the Bible in around 2006 or 7, something like that.
It's still the number one business book sold.
Is it? Okay, I can believe it, because it has some fairly prescriptive steps, and it is good stuff. Back in the day, for me, when I did a business degree, it was Michael Porter's 5 competitive forces of strategy. Michael Porter was the guru at the time, and I think he still is as well. But every one of those, to me, is like that's input into the business leader and their decision making and their execution of a plan for their company. It provides some structure, but it has to be tuned. It has to be thought through how it would apply in a particular environment, not just become, if we follow the methodology, we'll get the right answer. That isn't the case. So I think the role of coaches, as you do, Chris, and I do, the role of business councils and other, the environment, the networking type effect to learn from other people. Reading extensively, not just the guru type books, but reading about actual companies' experience and individuals' experience of what things work for them. So being sensitized to the right way to go about things, not just following a methodology, I think is important for success. The lean startup, I think, is another example. Yes, it has some extremely good principles, but it can be boiled down down to one thing. Don't build it and assume they'll come. Check they're going to come. Right. Check they're going to come, then build it. That seems. Talk to your customers. See what they want, then build it. Preferably get them to pay for building it too. It's great. As are many of these other things, I very much applaud people learning about them and putting them away in their experience bank to use, but don't take any one of them as being like the panacea and that's all. It's all going to come magically true because you read a book.
So I'm going to zing you in a different direction. That okay. Just because I think it makes for good radio. You started the rumor with me that you're quite the chef these days.
Right.
How does that creativity in the kitchen fit your life story? I know it expresses a lot of things about where you are in life, but why don't you run with that?
So it's a fairly being a accomplished cook is a fairly recent, probably the last 5 or 6 years. Maybe a bit longer. When I was, and it goes along with the reduced number of children in the house, culminating in empty nesting, a less
meaning
travel.
They don't have to eat your cooking, or
no. So at one stage in your life, at one stage in my life, and I'm sure you have parallels. I had all 3 kids at home. I was at that time in a very travel intense job, a lot of time away from home. And when I was home, there was dance practice, or there was a soccer game to go watch, or something with the family. And my wife wonderfully bore the lion's share of all the cooking and all that ferrying around and whatever. And I did what I could when I was there. Then since the mid 2010s, I haven't had a job with quite so much travel. I've been fortunate enough to be in charge of when that travel would take place, because one of the good things about rising to a leadership position, well, when you're the most risen leadership position, you can make decisions when you travel. So that less travel, less kids at home to need to be run around. They get independent, they can drive themselves, or eventually they go off to college and all the rest of it. And that leads to put it simply, more time to do stuff. And during that time, I've gradually learned to cook pretty much anything. Most recently, last several years, I have become not quite a vegetarian. I have chicken, but I don't tend to eat red meat. I do tend to try and eat vegetarian as much as possible, or fish or chicken. But I like good food. I'm not going to eat boring, bland food simply because I'm not having a lot of red meat. And there are ways to cook and prepare very attractive, tasty vegetarian food, but it takes some time. You have to learn the techniques to get flavor out of things, and it takes some time learning it. But also, it tends to be a longer process cooking things than if you're doing a meat based thing. So all of that's gone together to kind of give me a lot of outlet for cooking. I also like to cook for big groups. We regularly have parties at the house, and I'll cook something for 50, 60 people. And I take pride in that. And it's a conversation thing. And it allows me to, as they say, to just stay in the kitchen at parties and not have to go and socialize with people. So that's another virtue.
Yeah, well, it accomplishes a lot. You're certainly the most important person at those parties. I find it the person that can cook, they get all the attention. The change in diet. Maybe I just hang out with like-minded people. I'm certainly on a similar journey. Is that a health decision? I know one of the things that is your passion, your pride, is your love of football. You still play. You have a team. I think that'll help us transition to your next creative thing rather nicely.
Yeah.
How's all that tie together, Nick?
So since I was a very small boy, I've been an avid. We'll use football, and know that some of your viewers will understand we mean soccer, and others will know that it's football. I've been a football fan, and I've played probably since I was 4 or 5. I had a period when I also played rugby in parallel, and I would play rugby in the week and football at the weekends, and vice versa. Unfortunately, in the Air Force, well, it was another good thing about the Air Force. I could play. I don't think I ever worked a Wednesday afternoon, because I was good enough at football, cricket, and rugby to always play one of them for the station team every Wednesday afternoon. So that was a blessing. And now, fast forward, to when we first moved to America, which was in Connecticut, and I got involved with just as a way to get Nick Wilkinson Thomas. What's up? Sorry, that was just my cell phone guy. That as a way to just get to know people in the area. I picked up playing casual soccer games, football games up there. Then I moved to Delaware and got involved in similarly. We had a couple of times when we moved away from Delaware, we went to Australia and also Washington DC, and I played for teams there. And now I play here in. It's actually in the media and surrounding area in Pennsylvania with a bunch of guys. Similar age range. Some it actually varies. Some of them are a bit younger. And a really nice, great bunch of guys. Very global. It's run by a Greek guy, and there's French guys and people. Lots of people from South America, and really nice group of guys. A few Brits, always Irish. You always find them around football football field. But yeah, it's my main pastime. I'm not one for going for the gym. I'm not a huge runner or anything like that. I keep in shape by playing football to play football.
A few years back, I started Outside Insights really as a platform to do good. The pandemic was raging. It was a time of confusion, angst, and it kind of triggered some creativity where, for me, I was constantly spending time with either entrepreneurial business clients or the workforce. And there were problems with people not necessarily being where they want to be in life. So the irony is Outside Insights and my book Opposite the Crowd, which I co-authored with my dad, Alan Burkhard, were kind of born together, as Alan was some of those early guests. And those guest shows turned into chapters of our book. It was an audiobook first. It can be found anywhere you listen to audiobooks or listen to podcasts. It's out in both. But I did want to share for those of you that are interested in reading our story. And there really is some great stuff about helping you have the life you want, helping you work on leadership or master change. There's some great stuff in there. And that book is now available. It's available in a hardback from Amazon, and the Kindle as well as Audible versions are up. And I ask that you just, you're on Amazon anyway, ordering stuff for the house. Check out Opposite the Crowd and let me know what you think. Thank you. All right. Quick commercial break there. Nick, we were just ramping up a bit, talking a bit about your next film project, Old Boys. I'll hand it back to you.
Yeah, so this is a fun project. It's a soccer football. I use the word interchangeably these days now, Chris. So you just get used to it. So it's a soccer related comedy set around. I guess we can say loosely based on real life events. It's an old guys team from Pennsylvania who are variously cajoled, hoodwinked, tricked by their general manager to enter a World Masters tournament in England. They are underqualified, underexperienced, and certainly the underdogs. So they go over to England. But then, as happens in these kind of and initially they go to a small little provincial town when the managers told them they're going to a big city, and they are welcomed somewhat by the locals, but in the same way many Americans are welcomed to when they go to England, a mixture of kind of love and Mickey taking. So that our tagline for the film, I should have said, is Ted Lasso meets the Full Monty, because it's in Northern England. But then, as happens in these kind of movies, they find a way to win through and get to the final, which is played in a big stadium. And then I won't talk more about the finale because then nobody would ever go and watch the film. So we've been working on it for a couple of years. The script's in a really good place. We're working now on the casting and getting it hopefully into production. We had at one point thought we were going to production this summer, but circumstances didn't quite work out like that. Now we've got strikes at the moment. We've got strikes with actors and writers and all the rest of it. So we're looking to actually go into production with it next spring, and hopefully this one will be a commercial release. Hopefully go into movie theaters and then onto video on demand or streaming or whatever. So called Oldie Boys, and so that's kind of born of my own experience and kind of DNA of lots of people that I've met playing the game over the years in many different places, and seems to be ticking the boxes for what the public want. Coming out of the pandemic, there's a lot of call for light comedy, feel good. It's a very multi-generational thing. We've got the families play a big role. The teenage daughter of one of the guys ends up playing a big role. It's a fun film, and one we're excited to get into production.
coming from an American who fell in love with football, soccer. Wrexham is fun as a documentary.
Yeah,
Ted Lasso is so Nick, if you ever were to write your character into a movie, and
yeah.
people are going to see this on YouTube now, you realize it's not just Audible and those things.
Yeah,
Who would you love to play you if you ever wrote yourself into a film?
Oh, who would I like to get to play myself in a film? Um, let's think about that one a minute. Maybe
Prize question, I know. So indulge yourself, and
indulge myself. Well, it would have to be someone who comes from the northern part of England. Most
okay,
most actors that you see playing roles, well, a lot of them British actors, you would kind of assume they're from the south. So a northern English actor who could play me. So maybe the person who comes to mind, he's from Sheffield actually, which is a little further away from where I was born, but kind of same northern thing is Sean Bean.
okay,
Um, uh, he's been a fairly prominent actor in British stuff. We did actually at one point consider asking him to be in our Oldie Boys movie, but we decided having a guy who's very much seen as an Englishman playing an American in a movie where it was important to be American wouldn't quite work. But yeah, he could be someone. I guess I could go. My wife would say, "Why not Daniel Craig?" And I'll give you the honest
yeah.
answer: why not Daniel Craig? Because he's a huge Liverpool fan, and I wouldn't
And
allow myself to be played by a
Red
huge Liverpool
Devil,
fan.
Red Devil would never allow that. I think
No,
that
exactly.
it's good to
Yeah,
know you have principles and values, Nick.
yeah,
That's
exactly.
great.
And once, yeah, I wouldn't. My friends whose opinion I value hugely would probably never speak to me again if I was allowed myself to be played by Daniel Craig. So
Well, we look forward to hearing more about that.
yeah.
So I know you keep growing and evolving. Your story is all about that. Do you have a favorite book that you would recommend? One favorite book?
Um, I have a number of books that I've read multiple times and enjoyed reading, but I wouldn't say I've got one absolute favorite. I've got books that I read from um, like a business or biographical perspective.
Sure.
Um, I read a lot of history and biography. Um, but I also like a lot of fictional stuff. Probably Great Expectations
There you go.
the Dickens type stuff. I read
Well,
a
we'll
lot
put
of
that
shit.
in show notes. That's for that. That's exactly just what everybody's reading is always interesting, because it's
Yeah,
new to somebody else.
so um, I like things that can help me understand a topic in detail. And this perhaps gives you a best example. So, as another film project I'm interested in doing, and I've started doing, I'm looking to write a murder mystery whodunit type film.
I
If
love
you
it.
saw Knives Out over, the Knives Out thing over
Nick, it's
Christmas,
immediately what I thought about.
right? So something like that, but a much more modest budget, set in Delaware, so I can shoot it locally and help breathe some life into the near corpse of the Delaware film industry. And in order to kind of get my head into that space, I've just started reading a series, an actual compendium of all the books of Dorothy L. Sayers about Lord Peter Wimsey, which is
Okay.
a British kind of whodunit, like a parallel to kind of like an Agatha Christie type stuff. And I'm reading it, one, because it's entertaining and quite funny, but also because it gives you ideas for ways in which those kind of stories gets told, how the mysteries are revealed, how the plots are constructed, that kind of thing. So I similarly, I read for pleasure, but I also read for education, even when I'm reading fiction, to see how things have gotten done and how you can learn from that. Not to plagiarize things, because obviously that's not doesn't lead to anything new, but just to help understand how people have done things before and things you can use like putty that
Yeah.
you can work into your own frame.
There's an approach, there's an outline, there's a methodology from which to build your own stuff. I
Exactly.
think I understand that kind of foundational learning.
Yeah.
So, a couple closing questions. If you go back in time, what advice would you give your 21-year-old self?
What advice would I give my own self? I think most of the things that when I've taken a swing at something and made a decision to do something new, it has come off. I made a decision to leave the Air Force and go into civilian life. I made the decision to come to the United States while working for CSC. I've made decisions which companies I worked for subsequently. The only time when I didn't really do that was I probably stayed. I had opportunities to go to a different company and do other roles at points in time, at one particular point in time, and I didn't take it because I was too comfortable. I was too comfortable, and I think the discomfort is the sign of a positive move. You should always be, if you're within your comfort zone completely. If something's and I'd gotten to that point. I'd been with the same company 20 odd years, and everything seemed to be nice, and they do the right, they give you a lot of things that prevent you from thinking about other things, most especially stock options. But I kind of got into a position where I didn't make the bold move and then regretted it subsequently. So I think always reminding my younger self to, what is it they used to say? You miss all the shots you never take. Don't forget that, and don't ever allow yourself to get too complacent with things.
Yeah, I think change is always hard in the short term, and it's hard to realize that change is better in the long term. So
yeah,
you've talked a lot about things that you're excited about, and you've got a lot left to achieve. Are you heading more towards the creative, or do you still see yourself being CEO of another tech company?
To be honest, on any given day, I could give you answers to yes to both those questions. It really depends on what comes first and what the circumstances are at the time. If I get an opportunity to go and lead another tech company, and I think I would do it well, and it's a good opportunity, and most importantly, I think there's growth there for me, and the people that I'd be working with and for, I think I can learn from and enjoy, and then I would do that. If I keep turning out scripts and people get excited about them and they want to go make the films, and there's an opportunity for me to do that and also be involved as a director, then I'll do that. At the moment, I'm kind of, I don't have both feet in either one camp. I'm kind of riding the rail. But if something kind of came up that was like 100%, you have to be this side of the rail or that side of the rail, then I would willingly make that choice and get on with it.
It makes a ton of sense. And Nick, as we talked about, as I'm sure you're going to have success with the festivals, and you've got the next project in the crosshairs. I look forward to having you back where we can talk more about these, as the success I'm sure they'll be. It's been great to have you as a guest, Nick.
All right. Thanks very much, Chris. It's been fun chatting to you.